When I called to tell her my son had passed away, my daughter-in-law said she was busy with her boss. Days later, she showed up demanding 50% of the inheritance. I stayed silent and asked my lawyer to hand her the envelope. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My world collapsed with a phone call at 6:37 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was already awake, making coffee in my kitchen when the phone rang. It was St. Mary's Hospital. The doctor's voice was gentle but direct. My son Robert had suffered a massive heart attack in his sleep. By the time the ambulance arrived at his home, it was too late. I don't remember hanging up the phone. I just remember standing there, coffee pot in hand, as the world around me blurred. Robert, my only child, my son. Gone at just 42 years old. For several minutes, I couldn't move. The kitchen clock kept ticking, mockingly normal while my entire world shattered. Robert had always been healthy. He jogged 3 times a week, watched his diet. How could his heart just stop? Eventually, I managed to set down the coffee pot before I dropped it. My hands trembled violently as I reached for the phone again. I needed to call Charlotte, Robert's wife of 5 years. She would need to know. 3. Rings, then 4. 5. Finally, her voice irritated. Hello? Charlotte, it's Nancy, I said, my voice barely audible. I have terrible news. Can it wait? I'm heading into an important meeting with my boss. I gripped the counter to steady myself. No, Charlotte, it can't wait. It's about Robert. The word stuck in my throat. Robert passed away this morning. A heart attack. Silence on the line. Then, unbelievably, What? Are you sure? The hospital just called me. They need someone to come and... I couldn't finish the sentence. Identify the body. My son's body. Look, Nancy, I'm really busy with my boss right now. Can you handle this? I'll call you back later. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, unable to process what had just happened. Had my daughter-in-law really just dismissed the news of her husband's death because she was busy with her boss? Numbly, I called my neighbor Gloria to drive me to the hospital. I couldn't trust myself behind the wheel, not with my vision blurred by tears and my hands shaking uncontrollably. The next few hours passed in a fog, identifying my son's body, his face peaceful, as if he were just sleeping, signing paperwork, making preliminary arrangements with the funeral home. All while Charlotte remained unreachable. It wasn't until late afternoon that she finally called back. Sorry about earlier, she said, sounding more inconvenienced than grieving. Things have been crazy at work, so what's the plan with Robert? The plan? I repeated, disbelieving. Charlotte, your husband, my son, is dead. I know that, she snapped. I meant about the funeral and everything else. Everything else. Like what would happen to Robert's possessions, his money, his life, insurance. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind yet, but it seemed to be Charlotte's primary concern. I've made preliminary arrangements with Hartford Funeral Home, I said stiffly. The funeral will be on Friday. Fine. Text me the details. Another pause. Will we need to discuss the will and everything soon? I have some expenses coming up. I nearly dropped the phone. We can discuss that after we've laid him to rest. That night, alone in my house, memories of Robert flooded back. His first steps across this very living room floor. His gap-toothed smile when he lost his front teeth. At 7. His high school graduation, college years, the day he brought Charlotte home to meet me. I'd had reservations about her from the start. She seemed more interested in Robert's rising career than in Robert himself. But he was so smitten, and I wanted him to be happy. What mother doesn't? I pulled out photo albums, tracing his life from infancy to adulthood. My beautiful boy. My only family left after his father died 10 years ago. Now I was truly alone. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake wondering how someone dies of a heart attack at 42. Robert had always been so vibrant, so alive. Just last Sunday, we'd had dinner together. He'd seemed tired, stressed about work, but otherwise fine. Charlotte hadn't joined us for dinner. She rarely did anymore, always citing work commitments. Robert had made excuses for her, but I'd noticed the sadness in his eyes. At dawn, I finally drifted into a fitful sleep, only to be awakened by the doorbell. It was the funeral director, needing decisions about the service. As I sat at my kitchen, table selecting readings and music for my son's funeral, my phone pinged with a text from Charlotte. Need to meet about Robert's assets after funeral. My lawyer will contact you. No words of grief. No questions about the funeral arrangements, just a demand about his assets. Barely 24 hours after his death. I set the phone down, a strange calm replacing my sorrow. Something wasn't right. The Charlotte I knew was cold, yes, but this level of callousness seemed extreme even for her. As the funeral director gently asked me about Robert's favorite hymns, I realized I needed to understand what was really happening. For Robert's sake, and for mine. The day of Robert's funeral dawned bright and clear, cruelly beautiful for such a dark occasion. I'd barely slept the night before, tortured by dreams where Robert was calling for me, but I couldn't reach him. Hartford. Funeral home had transformed their main chapel with displays of Robert's favorite blue hydrangeas. I'd arranged photos chronicling his life. Robert as a toothless first grader, as a lanky teenager with his baseball team, in his college graduation robe, on his wedding day with Charlotte. That last photo made my heart ache. He'd looked so hopeful, so in love. People began arriving an hour early, Robert's colleagues from the architectural firm where he'd been partner, his college friends, neighbors. So many lives touched by my son. Nancy? A familiar voice pulled me from my thoughts. Margaret Reynolds, my oldest friend, wrapped me in a tight embrace. We'd drifted apart in recent years. Charlotte had never approved of my interfering friendships, but Margaret had come the moment she heard. "I can't believe he's gone," I whispered into her shoulder. "I know, honey. I know." The chapel filled quickly. I sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief that had belonged to Robert's father. An empty seat remained beside me, reserved for Charlotte. She arrived 12 minutes after the service was scheduled to begin. The entire congregation turned as the door opened. Charlotte stood framed in the doorway, dressed in a sleek black dress that seemed more appropriate for a business dinner than a funeral. Her makeup was flawless, her blonde hair arranged in an elegant updo. She moved down the aisle with measured steps, acknowledging nods from acquaintances as if she were attending a social function. "Sorry I'm late," she murmured as she slid into the seat beside me. "Traffic." I nodded stiffly, noting the strong scent of unfamiliar perfume. Robert had always given her the same fragrance for Christmas, a light floral scent he'd said reminded him of spring. This was something different, heavier, more expensive. Throughout the service, I was acutely aware of Charlotte beside me. While I struggled to maintain composure, she remained eerily calm. No tears, no visible grief, just an occasional glance at her watch or her phone, which she kept partially concealed in her small clutch purse. When Robert's best friend Jim delivered a heartfelt eulogy about Robert's generosity and kindness, I dissolved into tears. Charlotte placed a perfunctory hand on my shoulder, her expression unchanged. After the service at the graveside, Charlotte stood slightly apart from the gathering. As I placed a single rose on Robert's casket, I glanced up to see her engaged in what appeared to be a text conversation, her thumbs moving rapidly over her phone screen. The reception was held at my house. I moved through the rooms in a daze, accepting condolences, listening to stories about my son that sometimes made me smile through tears. Charlotte circulated efficiently, playing the role of grieving widow for exactly 45 minutes before announcing she needed to leave. Important work matter, she explained to no one in particular. Robert would understand. As she gathered her things, I noticed Margaret watching her with narrowed eyes. Once Charlotte had left, Margaret approached me in the kitchen where I was, arranging more coffee cups. "Nancy," she said quietly, "how long has Charlotte been like this?" "Like what?" "So detached. I know everyone grieves differently, but this doesn't seem like grief at all." I set down the coffee pot with a shaking hand. "I don't know. We haven't been close lately. Charlotte always made it clear she preferred when I kept my distance." Margaret frowned. "That doesn't sound like the Charlotte that Robert described to me when they first met. He said she was warm, engaging." "She was. Different then." I hesitated. "Margaret, when I called to tell her about Robert, she said she was busy with her boss and couldn't talk." Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Busy with her boss? That's an odd way to phrase it." Something in her tone made me look up sharply. "What do you mean?" Margaret glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. "Nancy, I didn't want to say anything today of all days, but something's not right. About 2 months ago, I saw Charlotte having lunch at the Capitol Grill with a man. They seemed very familiar with each other." My heart sank. It could have been a work lunch. "People don't hold hands across the table at work lunches," Margaret said gently. "And they certainly don't kiss goodbye in the parking lot." I gripped the counter for support. "Are you saying Charlotte was having an affair?" "I'm saying it's a possibility worth considering, especially given her behavior now." The remaining guests departed gradually, leaving Margaret and me alone in my too-quiet house. We sat at my kitchen table, mugs of cooling tea before us. "There's something else," I said, remembering. "The day before it happened, Robert called me. He wanted to meet for lunch, said he had something important to discuss. He sounded upset, but I didn't press him. We were supposed to meet today." My voice broke. "Today." Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Nancy, I think you need to be careful. If Charlotte was having an affair, and if Robert knew about it—" She didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. My mind was already racing ahead, connecting dots I hadn't even realized existed. "Robert updated his will recently," I said slowly. "He mentioned it at our last Sunday dinner. Said he'd made some changes, just to be safe." Margaret's expression was grave. "Do you know what changes?" I shook my head. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I just assumed it was standard estate planning. "You need to find out," Margaret said firmly. "Before Charlotte does." The doorbell rang, startling us both. Through the front window, I could see a sleek black car parked at the curb. When I opened the door, Charlotte stood on my porch, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, stepping past me without waiting for an invitation. "About Robert's will." Charlotte swept into my living room like she owned it, her expensive perfume lingering in the air. Margaret gave me a meaningful glance before quietly excusing herself, promising to call me later. "Who is that?" Charlotte asked, her tone dismissive. "Margaret, my oldest friend." "Ah, the busybody." Charlotte set her designer handbag on my coffee table and remained standing, as if sitting might commit her to staying longer than necessary. "Let's get to the point. When will Robert's will be read?" I stared at her, struggling to reconcile this cold woman with the daughter-in-law who once brought me flowers on my birthday. "The funeral was barely 2 hours ago, Charlotte." "I'm aware." She checked her watch. "But there are financial matters that need immediate attention. I have expenses." "What kind of expenses could be so urgent?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Charlotte's perfectly made-up face hardened. "That's not your concern. The point is, as Robert's widow, I'm entitled to his assets. I need to know when I can access them." I sank into my armchair, suddenly exhausted. Robert's lawyer, Mr. Jennings, said he'd be in touch next week. You can discuss it with him then. Next week? Charlotte's voice rose. That's unacceptable. I need to know now what I'm getting. The callousness of her words hit me like a physical blow. What you're getting? Charlotte, we're talking about my son's legacy, not door prizes at a charity event. She had the grace to look momentarily chagrined, but recovered quickly. Don't be dramatic, Nancy. It's just business. I have a right to 50% of everything. No. More if his will is outdated. Something in her calculating gaze made me uneasy. Robert updated his will recently, I said, watching her reaction carefully. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she controlled it. When exactly? A few weeks ago. I hadn't known that for certain until Margaret mentioned it, but Charlotte didn't need to know that. She paced the room, agitation evident in her movements. Did he say why? No, but he did seem troubled lately, distracted. Charlotte stopped pacing. He was working too hard, that's all. Always bringing projects home. Was he? I thought things were going well at the firm. They were. Her response came too quickly. I meant he was a perfectionist. You know how he was. I did know my son. But I was beginning to wonder how well I knew my daughter-in-law. Charlotte, I said carefully, is there something you're not telling me? About you and Robert? Her laugh was brittle. What are you implying? Nothing. I just find it odd that you're more concerned about Robert's money than about the fact that he's gone. Her eyes flashed. How dare you? Just because I'm not falling apart like you doesn't mean I'm not grieving. People process loss differently. Is that what your boss tells you? Charlotte froze, her expression suddenly guarded. What about my boss? You were busy with your boss when I called about Robert's death. I'm just wondering what kind of boss demands such dedication during a personal tragedy. She picked up her handbag, clutching it like a shield. I don't have to explain myself to you. Just have your lawyer contact mine about the will. I expect 50% of everything. The house, his retirement accounts, the life insurance, everything. With that, she strode to the door, pausing only to add, and I'll need access to his home office. There are work documents I need to retrieve. After she left, I sat in silence, her words echoing in my mind. The Charlotte I thought I knew had completely vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating woman fixated on what she could gain from my son's death. My phone rang, startling me. It was Margaret. How did it go? She asked without preamble. She demanded 50% of everything, didn't even try to hide her eagerness to get her hands on Robert's money. Margaret sighed. Nancy, there's something else you should know. After I left, I drove past your driveway and noticed Charlotte sitting in her car, talking on the phone. She looked excited, not grieving, excited. A chill ran through me. Margaret, I need to find out what's in Robert's will before Charlotte does. Do you know who his lawyer is? Yes, James Jennings. He handled my husband's estate too. Call him first thing tomorrow. And Nancy, be careful what you say to Charlotte in the meantime. After we hung up, I wandered into my study, where I kept old photo albums and mementos of Robert's life. As I flipped through pictures of him growing up, a small key fell from between the pages of an old album. I recognized it immediately, the key to Robert's desk drawer. He'd given it to me years ago, asking me to keep it safe. Just in case, he'd said with a smile. I'd forgotten about it until now. Robert's desk was in his home office, the same office Charlotte was suddenly eager to access. A plan began forming. In my mind, Charlotte had mentioned retrieving work documents, but what was she really after? And what might Robert have hidden in that locked drawer that she wanted to find? I slipped the key into my pocket. Tomorrow, I would visit Robert's house, Technically my house now, as I still owned it and had only let Robert and Charlotte live there after they married. I'd find out what was in that drawer before Charlotte could get to it. That night, I dreamed of Robert again. But this time, instead of calling for help, he was trying to tell me something, warning me. When I woke up, drenched in sweat, I couldn't remember what he'd said. But the sense of urgency remained. At first light, I called Mr. Jennings. His secretary put me through immediately, her voice softening when I identified myself. "Mrs. Peterson, I was going to call you today," Mr. Jennings said. "About Robert's will. There's something you should know before the formal reading." "What is it?" His voice dropped. "Robert made significant changes to his will 3 weeks ago. He specifically asked me to tell you privately before informing his wife. He said you'd understand when the time came." My heart raced. "What changes?" "I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Can you come to my office this morning?" "Yes," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "I'll be there in an hour." As I hung up, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Charlotte standing on my porch again, her posture tense and determined. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "I need to get into the house today," Charlotte announced without greeting. "I have a meeting this afternoon and need those files from Robert's office." I stood firmly in the doorway, not inviting her in. "I have an appointment this morning. We can go together this afternoon." Her eyes narrowed. "That won't work for me. Just give me the key." "Charlotte, it's still my house. I own it, remember? You and Robert were living there at my invitation." This wasn't entirely true. I'd signed the house over to Robert years ago, but kept my name on the deed as a co-owner. A technicality, but an important one now. "Fine," she snapped. "What time this afternoon?" 2:00, I said. She turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, I've been thinking. I want to sell the house. It's too big for just me, and I'd prefer something closer to downtown." The presumption took my breath away. "The house isn't yours? To sell?" "It will be once the will is settled. I'm entitled to Robert's share." "We'll see what the will says," I replied evenly. 2:00, Charlotte. After she drove away, I called Margaret. "Can you meet me at Robert's house in 20 minutes? I need to get there before my meeting with the lawyer." "I'm on my way," she said without hesitation. Robert and Charlotte's house was a beautiful craftsman-style home on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees. Robert had fallen in love with its character and history. Charlotte had complained about its distance from downtown and the small closets. Margaret arrived just as I was unlocking the front door. The house felt unnaturally quiet as we stepped inside. Robert's jacket still hung on the coat rack. His keys sat in the dish by the door. Everything looked so normal, as if he might walk in at any moment. "Where's his office?" Margaret asked softly. "This way." Robert's home office was at the back of the house, overlooking the garden he'd painstakingly designed. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with architectural books and family photos. His drafting table stood by the window, a half-finished sketch, still clipped to it. I moved to his desk, a heavy antique piece that had belonged to his father. The center drawer was locked. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the small key. Inside were the usual office supplies: pens, notepads, paper, clips, but tucked at the back was a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. Next to it lay a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Robert's distinctive handwriting. "What is it?" Margaret asked, watching my face. "A letter. And some kind of journal." I opened the envelope first, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. "Mom, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and you've remembered the key I gave you years ago. Smart mom, you always were one step ahead. I've suspected for some time that Charlotte is having an affair with her boss, Richard Klein. Last week I confirmed it. I confronted her, and she denied everything. But I have proof. Text messages, hotel receipts, photos taken by a private investigator I hired when my suspicions became too strong to ignore. I've updated my will to reflect this betrayal. Charlotte will not get what she expects. I've also documented financial irregularities I discovered, large withdrawals from our joint account that Charlotte can't explain. I believe she's been funneling money to Richard for some investment scheme. Trust. No one except Margaret. Yes, I remember how much you've always relied on her, despite Charlotte's efforts to isolate you. Show this letter to Mr. Jennings. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry for any pain this causes you. Robert. My hands shook as I passed the letter to Margaret. Then I opened the journal. Inside were meticulous notes, dates, times, locations. Robert had documented Charlotte's affair with clinical precision. There were also printouts of bank statements with certain transactions highlighted, and several photographs showing Charlotte and a distinguished-looking man in intimate situations. "Oh, Nancy," Margaret whispered, having finished the letter. Robert knew. He knew, I repeated numbly. And he was going to leave her. I carefully replaced everything except the letter in the drawer, locking it again. Charlotte wants to get in here this afternoon. Now I know why. We left the house exactly as we'd found it. As we walked to our cars, Margaret asked, "What will you do now?" "Meet with Mr. Jennings. Show him the letter. And then." I took a deep breath. "Then I'll meet Charlotte here at 2 and see what she does." Mr. Jennings's office was in a stately old building downtown. His secretary ushered me in immediately, her expression sympathetic. "Mrs. Peterson," Mr. Jennings stood as I entered, extending his hand. "I'm so sorry about Robert. He was a fine man." "Thank you." I sat in the offered chair, placing Robert's letter on the desk between us. "I found this today." He read it carefully, his expression growing grave. "This confirms what Robert told me when he changed his will. He was concerned about protecting his assets." "What exactly did he change?" Mr. Jennings pulled out a file. Robert revised his will to exclude Charlotte entirely. Normally, a spouse cannot be completely disinherited, but Robert included what we call a morality clause. Language specifying that proven infidelity would result in forfeiture of inheritance rights. And he provided ample evidence of that infidelity. My breath caught. So Charlotte gets nothing? Not quite nothing. The law requires that she receive something, so Robert left her a small cash bequest, $10,000. The rest goes to you, with specific instructions for charitable donations to causes Robert cared about. I sat back, stunned. Charlotte is expecting 50% of everything. Yes, well, expectations can be deceiving. Mr. Jennings closed the file. Robert also asked me to give you this in the event of his death. He handed me another envelope. He didn't tell me what it contains. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a USB drive and another note in Robert's handwriting. "Mom, everything is here. The whole story. Watch it alone." Mr. Jennings cleared his throat. "The formal reading of the will is scheduled for Monday. Charlotte and her lawyer will be there. Would you like me to inform her of the contents beforehand?" I thought of Charlotte, so confident in her demands, so callous in her grief. "No, I," said finally. "Let her hear it on Monday with everyone else." As I left Mr. Jennings' office, I checked my watch. It was nearly 2. Time to meet Charlotte at the house and see what she was really after. When I arrived, her car was already in the driveway. I took a deep breath, slipped the USB drive into my pocket, and prepared myself for the confrontation ahead. Charlotte was already inside when I entered the house. I found her in Robert's office, frantically pulling open desk drawers. "Looking for something specific?" I asked from the doorway. She startled, nearly dropping the stack of folders in her hands. "Nancy, I didn't hear you come in." "Clearly." I stepped into the room. "Those don't look like work files." Charlotte hastily shoved the folders back into the drawer. Just organizing some things. Robert was always so messy. Was he? I always thought of him as quite meticulous. I moved closer to the desk, especially about his personal records. Something flickered in her eyes. Worry, perhaps even fear. Yes. Well, appearances can be deceiving. They certainly can. I sat in Robert's chair, resting my hands on the desk. You know, Charlotte, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about wanting 50% of everything. Her posture relaxed slightly. Yes? Have you spoken with the lawyer? I have, actually. I met with Mr. Jennings this morning. Charlotte's eyes widened. Without me? That's completely inappropriate. I'm Robert's wife. Yes, you are. I kept my voice steady. Though I wonder what kind of wife is more concerned about her husband's money than the fact that he died suddenly at 42. She crossed her arms defensively. I don't have to justify my grief to you. Everyone processes loss differently. Is that what you call it? Processing loss? Is that what you were doing when you were busy with your boss the morning Robert died? The color drained from Charlotte's face. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm simply wondering about your relationship with Richard Klein. Charlotte froze. How do you know Richard's name? Robert mentioned him. A half-truth, but it had the desired effect. She laughed nervously. Richard is just my boss. Nothing more. Really? That's interesting because Robert seemed to think there was quite a bit more to it. Charlotte's fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. Robert had an overactive imagination. He was becoming paranoid these last few months. Paranoid enough to hire a private investigator? Her face went completely white. What? I leaned forward. Charlotte, I know about the affair. I know about the money you've been taking from the joint account. I know everything. For a moment, she looked like she might collapse. Then her expression hardened. You can't prove anything. And even if you could, it doesn't matter. I'm still entitled to half of Robert's estate. Actually, you're not. I kept my voice calm, even as my heart raced. Robert changed his will 3 weeks ago. He included what Mr. Jennings called a morality clause. Your infidelity has cost you your inheritance. Charlotte laughed, but it sounded hollow. That's ridiculous. No court would uphold that. The evidence is quite compelling. Hotel receipts, photographs, text messages. Robert was very thorough. You're bluffing. But doubt had crept into her voice. The will reading is on Monday. I suppose we'll find out then. I stood up. In the meantime, I'd like you to leave. This house belongs to me now. Charlotte's face contorted with fury. You planned this, didn't you? You turned Robert against me. No, Charlotte. You did that all on your own. She grabbed her purse, her movements jerky with anger. This isn't over. I'll contest the will. I'll make sure everyone knows what a manipulative old woman you are. By all means, contest it. But before you do, you might want to see what's on the USB drive Robert left for me. Her eyes darted to my face. What USB drive? The one with the recordings. Didn't you know? Robert had security cameras installed in the house 3 months ago, after he first became suspicious. This was a complete fabrication, but Charlotte couldn't know that. The blood drained from her face. You're lying, she whispered. The formal will reading is Monday at 10 a.m., Mr. Jennings's office. Bring your lawyer if you'd like, but it won't change anything. Charlotte stormed out, slamming the front door so hard that the windows rattled. I sank into Robert's chair, emotionally, exhausted but oddly calm. I picked up the phone and called Margaret. It's done, I said when she answered. Charlotte knows. How did she take it? About as well as you'd expect. She's threatening to contest the will. Let her try, Margaret said firmly. Robert has the evidence. What was on that USB drive, by the way? I haven't looked yet. I fingered the small device in my pocket. Robert said to watch it alone. After we hung up, I inserted the USB drive into Robert's computer. It contained a single video file dated 3 weeks ago. With trembling fingers, I clicked play. Robert's face filled the screen, his familiar blue eyes tired but determined. "Mom," he began, "if you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've learned the truth about Charlotte. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I was going to tell you everything at our lunch this week." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar that it made my heart ache. "I discovered Charlotte's affair with Richard 2 months ago. At first, I didn't want to believe it. Then, I found evidence of money transfers, large sums going from our joint account to an offshore account in Richard's name. When I confronted her, she denied everything." Robert's expression hardened. "I hired a private investigator who documented their meetings. The evidence is all in the journal in my desk drawer, along with bank statements showing nearly $200,000 missing from our accounts." He leaned closer to the camera. "Mom, there's something else you should know. The night I confronted Charlotte about the money, she was furious. We argued, and she said something that's been haunting me. You're worth more to me dead than alive." My blood ran cold as Robert continued. "I don't know if she meant it. Maybe it was just anger talking. But I've scheduled a full physical, including heart tests. Dad's heart problems were always a concern, and Charlotte knows that. I can't shake the feeling that I'm in danger." He paused, looking away briefly. "I sound paranoid, I know. But I've changed my will just in case, and I've documented everything. If something happens to me, take this to the police." Robert's eyes softened. "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry for all this. Give Margaret my love, too. She was right about Charlotte from the start." The video ended, leaving me staring at a blank screen, tears streaming down my face. My son had feared for his life, and now he was gone, from a heart attack at 42. Was it really just a tragic coincidence? Or had Charlotte found a way to make her chilling statement come true? With shaking hands, I copied the video file to my own USB drive. Then I picked up Robert's journal and the bank statements. Tomorrow, I would take everything to the police, but tonight, I needed to prepare for one final confrontation. Monday's will reading would change everything. The weekend passed in a blur of grief and determination. On Sunday morning, I took Robert's video, journal, and financial documents to Detective Michael Collins, an old friend of my late husband's. He listened gravely as I explained my suspicions. A healthy 42-year-old man doesn't just die of a heart attack, I concluded. Not without help. Detective Collins reviewed the materials carefully. "This is certainly concerning, Nancy. We'll order an autopsy immediately. In the meantime, don't confront Charlotte with your suspicions. Let her think. This is just about the will." Monday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt since Robert's death. I dressed carefully in a simple black suit, Robert's favorite, and drove to Mr. Jennings's office, arriving 15 minutes early. The conference room was arranged with a long oak table surrounded by leather chairs. Mr. Jennings greeted me warmly, gesturing to a seat at his right hand. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be." At precisely 10 a.m., Charlotte swept in, accompanied by a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. "This is my attorney, Philip Reed," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "Mr." Reed nodded curtly. "Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Jennings." They took seats across from us. Charlotte avoided my gaze, her attention fixed on Mr. Jennings as he opened a leather portfolio. "We are gathered for the reading of the last will and testament of Robert James Peterson," he began formally. "Before I proceed, I should note that this will was executed 3 weeks ago, replacing all previous versions." Charlotte shifted in her seat but remained silent. Mr. Jennings began reading the legal preamble, then came to the heart of the matter. "To my wife, Charlotte Ann Peterson, I leave the sum of $10,000 and nothing more. This bequest is made with full awareness of her infidelity with Richard Klein and her misappropriation of joint funds." Charlotte gasped. Mr. Reed placed a restraining hand on her arm. All remaining assets, including my share of the family home, my retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and life insurance proceeds, I leave to my mother, Nancy Elizabeth Peterson, with the following exceptions: $50,000 to establish a scholarship for architectural students at my alma mater, and $25,000 to my godson, James Wilson. Mr. Jennings looked up. There are additional provisions regarding charitable donations, but those are the primary bequests. This is outrageous, Charlotte sputtered. I'm his wife. I have rights. Your rights were forfeit when you violated your marriage vows, Mr. Jennings replied calmly. The will includes substantial evidence of your affair with Mr. Klein and financial improprieties. Mr. Reed leaned forward. My client denies these allegations. We'll be contesting this will on grounds of undue influence. Mrs. Peterson clearly manipulated her son during a period of emotional distress. I maintained my composure, though my heart pounded. Actually, Robert left a video statement explaining his decisions. Would you like to see it? Charlotte blanched. That won't be necessary. I think it is necessary, I countered, nodding to Mr. Jennings, who set up a laptop on the conference table. Robert's face appeared on the screen, his voice filling the room as he methodically detailed Charlotte's betrayal and his fears for his safety. By the time the video ended, Charlotte was visibly shaken, and even Mr. Reed looked uncomfortable. Additionally, I said into the silence that followed, the police have ordered an autopsy based on Robert's statement and other evidence. Charlotte's head snapped up. What? You went to the police? I did. Detective Collins found your statement about Robert being worth more dead than alive particularly interesting. Mr. Reed turned to Charlotte, his expression alarmed. What is she talking about? Charlotte stood abruptly. This is harassment. I won't sit here and be accused of murder, I supplied quietly. No one has accused you of anything, Charlotte. Yet. Mr. Reed gathered his papers hastily. This meeting is over. We'll be in touch regarding the will contest. After they left, Mr. Jennings turned to me. Do you really think she had something to do with Robert's death? I don't know, I admitted. But I intend to find out. 2 days later, Detective Collins called. Nancy, the preliminary autopsy results are in. They found traces of digitalis in Robert's system. My breath caught. Digitalis? Isn't that a heart medication? Yes, and Robert wasn't prescribed any. In high doses, it can trigger a heart attack that mimics natural causes. We're getting a warrant for Charlotte's arrest. The news broke quickly. Charlotte was arrested that afternoon at her office, led away in handcuffs as her colleagues watched, in shock. Richard Klein was brought in for questioning and quickly cut a deal, admitting that Charlotte had discussed getting rid of Robert to access his life insurance and retirement funds. The trial was mercifully brief. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including texts where she'd researched untraceable poisons, Charlotte accepted a plea bargain, 20 years for second-degree murder. I attended the sentencing, looking her in the eye as she was led away. She had taken my only child, motivated by nothing but greed and selfishness. I would never forgive her, but seeing justice served brought a measure of peace. In the months that followed, I slowly rebuilt my life. With Margaret's encouragement, I established the Robert Peterson Memorial Scholarship for aspiring architects, personally reviewing applications each year. I volunteered at the local hospital, finding purpose in helping others through grief similar to my own. 1 year after Robert's death, I decided to sell our family home. It held too many painful memories now. I bought a smaller house near Margaret, with a garden where I could plant Robert's favorite flowers. As I packed up Robert's belongings, I found a sketch he'd made years ago, a design for a community center, with affordable studios for artists. It had been his dream project, one he'd never had time to pursue. With the help of his former colleagues, I had the plans completed and submitted to the city council. Today, the Robert Peterson Community Arts Center stands in the heart of our city, a place where young architects and artists can find inspiration and support. It's not the legacy Charlotte tried to steal from him, but something far more meaningful, a testament to the man he was and the dreams he had. Sometimes in the quiet of evening, I sit in my garden and talk to Robert. I tell him about the scholarship recipients and their promising careers. I describe the latest exhibition at the Arts Center. I share my small triumphs and lingering sorrows. And I know, somehow, that he hears me. Not in some mystical way, I'm too practical for that, but in the impact his life continues to have on others. In the young woman who received his scholarship and now designs sustainable housing. In the children who discover art in the center that bears his name. In my own heart, where his memory gives me strength to move forward. Charlotte took Robert from me, but she couldn't take what mattered most, the love between a mother and son, a bond that transcends even death itself. That belongs to me alone, a treasure no one can ever steal. And in that knowledge, I have found not just justice, but peace. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.